Hi, I'm David,
And I'm Masu. Welcome to
the Hobby Hangout.
So in the previous episode 1, we were discussing about how board gaming can create connections through shared experiences with friends and family. And today we're going to be discussing how do you even get started with your gaming community, or maybe just growing it if you already have one. And we're going to focus on how to do it based on what are the right type of games to recommend for the different type of players that you're going to be inviting. So before we even dive into that, why do we even feel that games are good for us? So David.
So want to preface everything with mentioning that, this is not medical advice. This is just our personal opinion based on our experiences. But playing board games in of itself and having fun in a, structured environment can definitely help with de-stressing, creating, as we mentioned, connections and shared experiences with individuals, and gives you that opportunity to de-stress, especially in certain environments or certain situations. All of that in of itself sort of encompasses that positive mental health aspect of gaming, and having fun in general. Sorry, you want to jump in there for a second?
Yeah, I just wanted to expand on a little bit more. Like, for example, I am an introvert and I find it very difficult to find a topic to get started with a conversation. Once there is one, then I can keep going. I definitely like to talk. But if there's no common topic, like I just can't even figure out how to approach people. And so when you have board games, then you have something in common already that gets you started with a conversation. It might not be a personal conversation, but it gets you started with something that later on you can use it as a conversation starter. Or just simply you don't want to have a conversation, and that's okay. It doesn't make it awkward because then now you're just focusing on playing a game. So I find that it's helpful for me, especially in situations where, like, for example, you may be with a bunch of people, but if everyone is playing board games, then it just feels fine. It's not like I want to run away from here. Sometimes you can't run away from it. And so just having that, the board game is just a way to, figure out how to fit in without necessarily getting too much out of your comfort zone. And I think another one too is when you have remote employees. Now, we will usually play with online games, and they're not as good as the board games. But I find that for me, being a remote employee for 9 years or so, it has been it has helped create a different connection and get to know people at more of a personal level without being invasive of their privacy, but just in a different environment that is very much different than from work. And later on with work interactions, it just helps you because then you understand how a person has different um, versions of themselves, and it just helps you understand better and have more empathy, I find.
Absolutely. So where does that take us to?
So the type of players.
Yeah.
Let's start with the skepticals or non-gamers.
Sure. Yeah. So in our experiences, again, just sort of leaning into that corporate environment, because that's definitely somewhere where you're going to run into, if you're trying to introduce games and grow that community in that space, you're definitely going to run into very skeptical people. You're obviously in a professional environment, and there can be hesitation to do something that is fun in that professional environment, although not always the case. But when you're looking at those skeptics or non-gamers, you definitely want to lean into games that are not complex, simple rules, fast paced. You don't want to introduce new gamers to a game that's going to take 1, 2, 3 hours to complete. It's too much of an investment, a personal investment from someone without knowing whether or not this is something that they're going to enjoy. So really focusing on those simple games, and ensuring that the key aspect is fun, I find, versus strategy. trying to get that hook in them with the fun experience definitely is what creates that snowball effect into different types of games.
And the visuals and the setup also matter, because if you start coming up with, like a very elaborate setup, like right away, even when it might not impact the way that you play it, I think that it creates that impression on the person being like, whoa, what am I getting into? So picking something that is a lot easier to visually digest as well, it will be recommended. And so my favorite one will be Happy Salmon. It plays very fast, but it's so fun that you just end up playing a lot of it, like a lot of rounds. And the only warning here is that it is required that you're mobile. So just keep that one in mind. There's only 4 types of cards. It's very easy to explain it. And even someone who might not be fluent in English will be able to understand it, because it has the visual cues to help you understand what the actions are.
Yeah, absolutely. I also like that game as an introduction game, or even sort of a team building environment to introduce gaming to that team as a method to connect. As Susana said, it's a very simple, very fast paced, very little setup. There's no setup. You just hand people a deck of cards, and it's always interesting, and I find it fun to see adults turn into kids so quickly when they play that game. You can see just how quickly it ignites that childhood sort of experience with everyone. And you often, every time I've played it, there's certain people that'll be like, oh, I'm just going to watch. After 1-2 rounds, they're ready to jump in and experience the fun that they see everyone having.
Yeah, it definitely creates like a very specific kind of vibe that it's like when kids go to the park and they see the other kids running around and they're like, yeah, I would do that too. It's very much the same. And I think another one, oh, by the way, we do not have any affiliation with any of these companies. We're not getting paid to promote it or anything like that. We're just sharing from the games that we have and we like. The other one was Gimme That. That one is very straightforward. You only have to fill out numbers from 1 to 100, but there's a lot of roadblocks in the ways to make it a little bit interesting. But I find that one is also very easy to explain, and it's fast paced as well.
Yeah, simple components. Everyone can understand very quickly what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I know I kind of mentioned this in the first episode as well. Don't be afraid to introduce just generic card games, right? Again, classic.
Not
sorry,
generic.
not generic. Classic card games. Just pulling out a deck of cards, playing pig, vice president, or asshole. But playing classic card games can be definitely an easy way. Most people may already know them, and an easy way to start introducing things. Speaking about card games, though, one that I always like to break out is also the Mind. The intention of it is to be played without really speaking all that much. So another great game that you can play with people when there may be a bit of a language barrier, or introducing it to an environment where they may not all speak English, and there isn't any readings, right? It's just numbers. And again, very simple rules, very easy to play. You play as a team, cooperatively. You're all trying to achieve the same goal. So also a very fun game to introduce new players to.
Yeah. There are probably a lot more examples, but maybe we can continue moving on. So what about the casual gamers?
So casual gamers, these are individuals that they're, I guess, familiar with games. Again, you probably want to not lean too heavily into long, heavy strategic games with these types of players. When you get together with casual gamers, they're there for the experience of gaming, and they more than likely want to play more than one game, and they want to have that variety of experiencing something new on a more regular basis. So that's again where you want to focus on the shorter games. You can definitely introduce strategy here, but keeping it short, and to your earlier point, not something that's going to take half an hour to set up and another half hour to put away.
Yeah. And I think that it's also fun is an element. I think that one thing that differentiates the casual gamers from the non-gamers or skeptics is that they still want to keep it light, but they have already been introduced to the game and they know that they enjoy it, but they're still not fully committed to it. So still keep it fun. One of the games that I find has been successful for us is Camel Up. With that one, just a visual actually. When you open it up, there's like a pop-up palm tree and it looks pretty cool. And people are like, "Oh," and then you tell them that it's related to betting. And then they're like, "Oh, yeah, I want to do that." And then there's a thing, right? Is it about the name?
Oh, Camel Up or Camel Cup, as some people refer to it. But yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know about that. And then I read it somewhere. And then I came back to see the box and I was like, yes, is it Camel Up or Camel Cup? Let us know what you think about that in the comments.
Another great game is Dungeon. What's it
5 minutes Dungeon?
Not 5 Minute Dungeon. Another good game. Yeah, 5 Minute Dungeon. But there's the Dungeon and Dragons one.
Oh,
Dungeon Mayhem. That's the game. Again, there's definitely some elements of strategy there.
did you say elephant?
Maybe elements of strategy, and you have different players, so there's different ways, play styles. So it definitely adds that variety. You can keep playing the same game but switching characters. So very, very dynamic in how a person can play that game from one time to the next. Right? It doesn't always have to play the exact same. But overall, it's still a very fast game and simple rules there.
And for the most part, it's very engaging for everyone. I think that from all of the times that we have played it, there has been only the one time where the very specific characters that were picked in the group and the very specific actions that were taken took people out on the second round, meaning that they had to wait for so many rounds doing nothing, just sitting on the sideline. So when you have, especially if you have a bigger group, it's not very much fun to just sit on the side. But yeah, like I said, for the most part, it's very rare that it happens. But if you feel like that might be an issue that you run into, then maybe steer clear of that one if you don't have a side activity for the people that have lost and to do something else. What other games do we have?
So I think casual gamers is also, and maybe new gamers as well, is that those two categories is where you can also bring in a lot of like the party games, maybe even the social deduction games. And there's classics like Telestrations and Cards Against Humanity and Apples to Apples, I think it is. It's just having that interaction with the game of drawing and seeing something and having a shared experience around the laughter and the fun pictures that people draw and things like that is definitely something that typically does appeal, and it's easy enough to learn.
The hand-to-hand wombat is pretty good too.
Yeah. I think again you have to be comfortable touching each other because that one is touching hands. But still, it's fun, especially when you know the group of people and you're okay having that physical contact through that game. But, yeah.
And one of the things is that if you're voted out and you're not playing anymore and you're just observing, it's just as much fun because everyone else has a blindfold on. So once you're seeing how it looks like, it's actually fun for the person that has been voted out. So I think that for me, that's something that I like, right? Like, I don't like to lose, but then I don't like to lose and then having to wait for a long time. The other ones that are pretty fun too are anything that you have to flick, like dice flick.
Yeah, dexterity games. Yeah. So that's definitely something you probably want to introduce more so to like the casual gamer than a new gamer, because sometimes dexterity games can have a bit of setup to them, depending on what the game is. But definitely fun games. I know one that we've always enjoyed playing with our family is Ice Cool. I don't know how easily available it is nowadays, but it's definitely fun having the little penguins that you're flicking around the school and trying to collect fish. But yeah, that's a fun one.
I like the flip ships as well.
Flip ships as well, yeah.
It's so hard. but there's also a lot of opportunities to get something done. So it feels like you're making progress, even though you're very likely going to
Yeah.
lose at the end, but it feels good and it's a cooperative game as well.
And that sense of accomplishment when you make one of those impossible shots.
Yeah.
By mistake, but you made the shot.
Okay,
social gamers,
social gamers. That's where we're at.
That's where we're at.
Yes.
Do you want to take this one? I think you fall more into this category yourself.
No.
Yeah.
No. You go ahead and describe me.
So I think social gamers are primarily there not just to experience the gaming, but also to experience the environment, right? Whether you're playing upbeat music or music themed to the games you're playing, having snacks, drinks, beverages, things like that available, really set that atmosphere, right? Social gamers more than likely would be more open to playing in like a board game cafe or in gaming stores and having that public experience with their board games.
I wouldn't necessarily say that I would like to have a public experience. Again, as an introvert, I would prefer my selected group of people that we get together. But so what we do, and I think that we touched on this on episode 1, is that we get together with friends and we have a marathon during a day. And we make it a thing where we have brunch together. We have like this huge breakfast that we cook for all of us, including our kids. We have the dogs together as well. Then we set up our games and it's like we have a pile and we try to go through as many as we can. It doesn't always happen. And then we have snacks on the side to make sure that we can keep going, have the fuel to continue going at it. And then, we break for lunch and we try to make it fast so we could go back to playing. And then sometimes, usually dinner. And then at some point when we're very tired or the kids are tired, then, it's time to call it a night. But I think that that's probably what makes us a little bit different than we're in it to like actually enjoy it and play for as long as we can.
Yeah, I think the other distinction is that social gamer, at least in our experience, is typically individuals that you're more familiar with and have a closer friendship or relationship with versus the strangers or people you don't know as well, where you're probably interacting in that new gamer or casual gamer experience. So I do feel like for us anyways, I think the social gaming is just as much about the atmosphere and the environment
Mhm.
as it is about the games. And being comfortable as you're playing those games, right?
Another thing too is that, like, for example, if I was in a big group and there's like different tables of different games, if something just didn't feel like interesting to me, I wouldn't play it. Whereas when we're with our friends together and they get a new game, then it's like, okay, I'll give it a try. So I feel like there's a little bit more openness to try games that you wouldn't necessarily have tried otherwise. Because that's kind of like part of the fun, right? Like exploring new things that you might like or if you might not like, and that's okay. But I think it's a little bit more of how would I explain it? Commitment, I guess. So what games do we have for social gamers?
I do feel like social gamers in that group, you're probably looking at more cooperative games. Again, not so much that you can't play player versus player and competitive games.
Oh, I like competitive. I like to win.
Yeah. But like typically because you're playing for such longer periods of time, you don't want people sitting out and not having that opportunity to continue playing, right? Because it is about that environment and being together as a group for a longer period of time. Typically, cooperative games tend to hit the table more often, I feel. Again, it's not that it's the only types of games we play, but I think that's primarily the focus of the types of games that we're playing.
My favorite one is gonna be Zombicide.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the reasons is every time that we play it, we always think of a new strategy, which someone never follows, of course. 1 minute in, and he's like, "No, I'm gonna do something else." But every time that we're close to it, we're like, okay, this is where a strategy went wrong. And then we try it again. And of course, it doesn't matter, right? Like we usually lose. But I think that it's a game that just keeps us thinking about it and keeps us coming back to it several times. And it takes a very long time to play as well. But I feel like that's one that I really enjoy and that it's not necessarily for casual gamers.
I think this is also where sort of branching off of the board game aspect of things. For me, where like role playing games come into play, it's obviously going to take a little bit more familiarity and comfort level with the people that you're playing with to play your role. And again, not that you have to act in any particular way, but if you're not comfortable with role playing, it can be difficult to do that when you don't know the people around the table. I'm sure not for everybody. Some people, I'm sure, are perfectly fine diving in with strangers and having fun. But yeah, I think that longer investment of time to do a role playing game is also tends to lend more to the social gamer, where you're creating that comfortable environment to actually partake in a longer gaming session. And I think it also translates to tabletop wargaming. Although not all games, there's a lot of newer ones that are focused on being faster paced and smaller scale, trying to branch into that more casual gamer aspect. But I mean, overall, just the time it takes to build an army, paint an army, learn the rules, and then actually sit down with one other opponent, because typically you're only playing 1v1 for a 2-hour period of time. To me, creates that strong foundation for it to be. It's pretty much a social interaction, right? Because you're finding someone that you're going to commit 2 hours at a minimum to play this game. So ideally, you want to make sure that the person is able to communicate with you, that you're comfortable, you have a good environment. Because I'm sure, I mean, I've experienced it from time to time in the past. Playing a 2-hour game where you're just not having fun. Not so much about the game itself, but maybe it's the person you're not connecting, or there's just that vibe is wrong, and now you're committed to playing this long game and you're just not enjoying it.
Okay. Well, let's move on. Wait, did we keep recommendations on that one?
Well, you said Zombicide. That was a big one. Heat is another good one. It's a newer game. A lot of fun and a lot of variety in that game and how you can alter and change it. It does take some time, and it's a little bit not complex, but there's definitely strategy in there. But that's another fun game.
I like Quirky Circuits.
Quirky Circuits, that's a good one. It's cooperative.
Yeah.
You're trying to navigate a robot across the board together without really knowing what each other is playing.
Right.
There's some hints on the back of the card to try and guess at what other players are playing. But you're trying to think things through and what moves may work best. But more often than not, your robot's just spinning in circles.
Yeah. There's, I guess, Massive Darkness.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you feel Massive Darkness falls into this?
I think so, but just like you mentioned, right? It's especially if you're gonna play a campaign, it takes several hours, and when we did it the last time, it was over several months. So it's gonna be with someone that is gonna be committed to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, games like Zombicide and Massive Darkness do allow you to just sort of play one-off scenarios versus campaigns. But even then, like, it still takes a while to even just set the game up.
Yeah.
Get all the tiles, the boards, the cards, the pieces, the player boards. Everything does take time. So it's definitely a bit of an investment on that.
So let's move on to the story lovers.
Yeah, so story lovers, I think, lends itself well to role-playing games in general. Obviously, there's Dungeons and Dragons. We have the My Little Pony system. We have the No Thank You Evil. My kids love and play that. So simpler systems. But obviously, there's a lot of different role-playing games out there nowadays.
There's the one, is it called Once Upon a Time? You have to draw different cards that it gives you a hint of kind of like what the card is about, and then you have to build a story, and as people keep drawing the card, they have to build up on it. And kind of like the interesting part is that while everyone is building up on the same story, at the end of the day, there's one winner only.
Trying to get that story to go to your end.
Exactly. Yeah. So it makes it quite fun, the things that you come up with. And for me particularly, I don't play these games very well because I'm more of the person that needs to have very clear options of what to do. So I find that it's a little bit way out of my comfort zone. But this game that we have played with the story, like it feels awkward at first to come up with weird things, but then everyone is trying to think about it and everyone is like, well, I'm just going to say something weird here and make the story go in weird directions. And that just starts making it comfortable. Like after a round or two, then you're like, okay, yeah, I'm getting it. It's all having fun at the end of the day. And so I feel like that one is, I feel like it's easy enough to introduce to people. Even casual gamers might be open to it.
I do like the uniqueness of that game though, because as you said, it can be a little uncomfortable or difficult to get going sometimes. But I do find when you play more than one rounds of it, it almost like starts to get your brain working in a more creative mode. So I think it's a great game just to boost creativity in general. Having that as a structured way to promote creativity and have those cogs working in your brain, especially if you have to think creatively for other aspects.
Yeah, now that you mentioned that, I actually adapted that for one of our social events at work. So it had to be remote friendly. We didn't use the cards necessarily because, it's not the same when you have a card physically and then try to accommodate that for a remote setting. And it was pretty fun. We came up, I can't remember what the story was about, but it was very wild. And it just like got us to keep talking about it for several weeks afterwards. And it became kind of like an inside joke at work.
Another one I want to mention is actually, I guess it's a publisher, Plaid Hat Games. So they definitely produce some very good storytelling games. In particular, we've been enjoying Familiar Tales and Forgotten Waters, and Stuffed Fables. Stuffed Fables and Familiar Tales being more for a younger audience. I wouldn't say kids because I still enjoyed playing it as well. But that aspect of having a book and you're going through the story and your characters grow and interact with the story. But then they have more different types of storytelling games for an adult audience. And Forgotten Waters is a fun one, and it plays, I think, 8 players. So it's definitely a big game that you can play with a lot of people, crafting your pirate and going through and telling a story. So that's a fun one as well. But there's a lot of options nowadays for that storytelling
Mm-hmm.
type of players. Yeah.
So what about strategic thinkers?
Yeah, I don't delve too much into this space. Not that I don't enjoy strategy games, but I do think a lot of them can often take a longer investment of time. And again, you have to find the right people that are going to enjoy those types of games. But the one thing I do like about strategic games is they more than likely do not have just one way of winning, right? There's often multiple ways of being able to win the game. And it allows the opportunity for different players to play the game differently. Even though they're all playing the same game, you may be executing completely different strategies than the person next to you. I think for me, Rising Sun is one of my favorite games when I think about strategy games. And just that aspect of being able to create alliances, look to create fights or gain favor by the gods in the game and things like that. It's just so many different aspects going on in the game that I really enjoy that one.
Yeah, the game itself is not bad, but for me, the setup it takes like half an hour. It feels like so I just can't sit around for too long. But yeah, being able to form those alliances is something that I haven't seen very often in other games.
And we have other ones similar to like Mezzo, which is more Aztec themed. It does play somewhat similar to Rising Sun, not the exact same, but again, a heavy strategy game there, multiple ways to win. Wonderland's War I quite enjoy. Now that one is a very large game. It takes a huge amount of space across the table to get everybody set up. But again, you have a lot of different ways that you can try and win the game. It has different aspects to the game, from the tea party versus the actual wars going on, or the battles. So I enjoy that one as well.
You also have like the tabletop wargaming
Yes. Yeah.
wargaming games. Well, the only one that I know about is Warhammer, but we have been playing the other one with our daughter, right?
Shatterpoint is one we've been playing a lot recently. I do enjoy that one a lot. It's not the issue I've always found with Warhammer is, as much as you try and develop a strategy, often it just turns into trying to kill as many people as you can to win the game.
That's what I like. That's my jam.
And that's what I kind of like. That's so different about that Shatterpoint game, is that you can definitely kill people, and it does benefit you to injure people. But the system itself is around getting those objectives, trying to shift the balance of the game, because it's constantly going back and forth. And after you've injured somebody and they can't claim certain things, there's no real value in continuing to attack that person just to kill them. And there's more value in trying to secure objectives and push people off of certain objectives and things like that. So it's just a lot. I feel like there's a lot of strategy in there on how do you position your people, what skills to use, where to move, versus just trying to kill. So I am enjoying that one quite a bit.
Well, the other ones too that are pretty fun is the wolves.
Yes.
It's about your wolves having, or I guess, conquering a territory. And that territory that you want to have presence on keeps changing depending on the round. But I find that just the board game itself, like the tiles that you have, the wolves that you have, they look good. So it's inviting to play. And the other one will be Flamecraft. I find like that one also, the visuals. I'm a very visual person. I like it when the games look good. So that one is also very inviting. And what I like about that one is that everyone is taking actions that are going to benefit others as well. But then at the same time, you're trying to just win for yourself. Yeah. So I find that it's a little bit unique, right? Like there's that interaction with others, but you're not necessarily cooperating towards the same end.
What do you think about exit games?
Well,
do you remember the first one we played?
So that's exactly what I'm thinking about. So back when we played the first one, I feel like the friends that we were playing it with were not as committed to games the way that we are now. So nowadays, like I said, we have marathons. But back then, I don't remember playing for that long with them. And so that game, it took like 2 hours just to find the first clue, I think.
Oh, to find the first, yeah. To try and finish it, I think it took us almost 4 hours.
Yes. Yeah. Because I remember like someone had to go somewhere and people were in and out, and then they came back and they were like, "What? You're still on this?" We got better, definitely.
Yeah. Thinking back on when we played it originally, I think that's a case of introducing the wrong type of game.
Yes.
To our friends at that point in time, in where our community was. Right? Yeah, I think it was the wrong game at the wrong time.
Yeah, and I don't think since then, I don't think that we have ever played another exit game with them.
No, I think we have, because they've definitely gotten more into exit games themselves, and they've purchased more.
But I don't think that we've played it together. I mean, one of the things with this is that if you have more than 2 people, it gets very complicated because everyone is looking at the same things and then only one person can get it. The other one that was fun actually was the Sherlock Holmes one. Well, now we know that our friends do like that kind of solving murder mystery kind of thing. Not everyone is going to enjoy that because it means that you're looking instantly at a bunch of letters over and over again, and not everyone is going to have the patience for that.
And the frustration that comes along when you just can't understand what the clue is, as long as it's in the right environment, the right people.
And like I said, right, like we felt comfortable with them to the point where we can try a new game, and if it works out, great. If it doesn't work out, then we just say, this game is not for me,
Yeah.
and that's fine. We just move on. It's not gonna create any resentment or anything of the like. It's not gonna make them not want to play with us
Yeah.
anymore either.
I'm thinking on like unfathomable. Um,
Which one is that?
the one with the sea monsters and the boat, where we're all playing different roles and trying to get the boat to safety, and then someone is, I think, someone playing against the rest of the players. But that one does have a good element of strategy in itself as well.
Yeah, I don't remember the game.
You want to edit that out then?
No, that's fine. We'll leave it here for whoever is listening, and maybe they know that game. I don't remember it. But yeah, so why don't we move on to? I think like what we have said is a very important element is recommending the right game to the people that you're playing with at the right time, and depending on the relationship that you know with them and how well you know them. But then there's other things too that just makes gaming more approachable, I guess, in terms of the atmosphere. So one of the things that is very important to me is I gotta have my snacks. I like them. Like that for me, it's part of the gaming aspect. That's part of the gaming experience, especially when we're playing these very long gaming sessions. Just having snacks that are easily available that that is not going to interrupt you from playing, but that also is not going to get you all messy because you don't want to ruin people's game. What do you think about snacks?
Yeah, for me, it's not a key component, but I'll definitely enjoy a snack if I'm hungry, for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's the seating aspect of it. Especially when you're going to be playing for a very long time. It just not having a comfortable chair can, like at my age at least, I feel like everything starts hurting, and then I feel like I need to stretch. So I feel like we want to maximize comfort so that we can go for as long as possible. Now, comfortable chairs are not necessarily something you can be like, oh yeah, sure, I need that. I'm just gonna go buy them because they're expensive. But just something to keep in mind when recommending the games.
Yeah, I think the other thing you can look at is also like dexterity and active games and breaking up the types of board games you're playing, right? Especially as we said, if you're playing for longer periods of time, introducing a game where you have to stand up or you have to move or you have to get up and reach around the board to be able to move things and flick things and stuff like that, can definitely break up that long sitting session, which definitely helps.
Yeah. The other one, and this was a big thing for us.
Lighting.
So where we used to play before, it's one of those living rooms where there's no, I guess, socket for a light. And so we only had the one lamp on the side. And especially at night, it was so hard to be able to read any of the cards or any of the words in any of the games that we had. Some games, the material can also reflect the light in a way that if it's coming from an angle, it just makes it really hard as well.
I think for anything that'll just primarily maybe limit what time of days you're playing, even just having an open window or a window that you can get some natural light in is definitely important too, or can assist.
Yeah. What type of music do we like?
Yeah, just anything upbeat, and as long as everybody's enjoying the music, I think we play pretty much anything. But it helps keep the environment positive and fun, right? So there's always going to be conversations occurring, but not all, or maybe not always. People need to think about what they may be doing in the game. If it's a lot of strategy or planning, just having that background music can definitely set the atmosphere for sure.
The other important thing is setting the expectations of how long you're going to be playing for. Because there's, there might be commitments that people have. They might need to wake up early the next day. maybe, like I said, right? Like we're getting old, we're getting stiff, and we're like, you know what? I can only be sitting for these many hours or whatever. Um, so I think that you have to pay attention to the body language, because it's not. I guess we have never asked that, right? Until when do you have to go home or anything like that. But it's, I think, just paying attention to the non-verbal cues of are people maybe starting to get tired? They're not comfortable anymore. Are they looking at the clock?
But I think that's also something that will vary based off of like the type of individuals you're playing with. I think when you're looking at introducing something to new people, I think it can be very beneficial for you to structure the time and say, we're only intending to play for 15 minutes or 30 minutes. Just setting that expectation and that boundary for them can ensure that they're willing to invest that time to try this out, right? Versus them not knowing if they commit to this, is going to take an hour of my time, 2 hours of my time. Just setting that expectation and keeping it short for those newcomers. But then when you get into more built relationships and you have that established community and you're playing with different people, often, as you said, that's where you don't want to explicitly say, oh, we're only going to play for 2 hours, then you got to leave. But obviously you do want to share, you have certain commitments and things like that, and you play to what you can with your group.
Yeah, and there's times that, you try to play as many games as possible, but you're not going to be able to get through all of them. So try to figure out how to prioritize them based on, is it something that is new that no one else has played, or, depending on the time that it's going to take. And I think that it's also important just to know when to call it a night, right?
Yeah.
There have been situations where we're falling asleep, like our eyes are just closing, and it's just not fun anymore for the rest of the people that are playing. You don't have to finish the game. It's better to leave it as a good experience that you can pick up at another time, rather than being like, oh, I was so tired and I had to get through it.
Yes.
So gaming in action, give me some examples of how you have successfully or unsuccessfully recommended games to other people.
So maybe I'll start with an unsuccessful story, and not so much for that I was unsuccessful, but Castles of Burgundy, I know, is a very popular game. Lots of people seem to love it. I do not, at least from my recollection of it, do not enjoy that game. But I think this is an example of being introduced to the game at the wrong time. In this case, I was just so tired. I was ready to go to sleep, but I didn't say I was ready to go to sleep. My brother introduced me to the game. And he was trying to walk me through the game. I was sleeping between turns, and I just
Wait,
did
is that
not.
the one? Is that the one where we were all sleeping, or
No,
is that
no,
not
this
okay?
is not.
Different sleeping time.
Yeah. And I just did not enjoy the experience at all. So much so that when he asked if I want to play again, I just don't want to. Maybe I'm missing out on something big here, because I know it is a very popular game and it has a lot of great ratings. But to me, that was an example of not overwhelming, but like bringing it in a game. When I wasn't in the right frame and the right environment to actually experience it in a positive light. But who knows? Maybe one day I'll try it. Maybe I'll try it again.
You take a nap first.
Yeah. Another one is we've had sort of end of the year pool parties for our kids when they end school. And with the kids coming over, typically their parents will come over as well. And we don't have a lot of interaction with a lot of the parents from schools. So, you have all these people that you don't really know, all spending time together for, a couple of hours while the kids are having fun in the pool. And that's one of the environments where we brought out Happy Salmon. And typically we'll start with the kids playing Happy Salmon, and adults can see the game playing, see how easy it is. And, almost every single time we've got adults willing to take part and then enjoying the game as well. So that's always one of those go-to games to introduce people and get that party started with some of a fun experience. What about you?
When we went to Mexico, for example, right, where we had uh, family members that didn't speak English. So picking the right games that can play fast, but then also that it doesn't have a lot of wording to it so that it can make sense. And one of the great examples is actually Skull King, because it almost like it plays with suits, and people are mostly familiarized with suits from like regular card games. So then you're just introducing a few more characters that have some specific rules. But because it's very visual, it's easier for them to understand it and get playing, right?
Mhm.
The other one was Camel Up, right? Because it's very easy to explain, and you're just betting, right? And it just becomes a little bit fun because then the camels are going in different directions. So it's kind of like a good one where, it's a little bit lighter and things go in ways that you didn't expect it, but you don't have to control as much of it.
Mysterium Park. That was
Oh,
another.
Mysterium Park, yes. And then just thinking back on how I got started, which is with Warhammer, I think that if David had introduced it to me starting with the rules, I will probably have said no, no way. If he had shown me the book of rules, I would have probably said no. But I think that what got me into it successfully was that he showed me, or this is my recollection anyway. He showed me the different armies and like actually just like the visuals of how the armies were gonna look like. And when I spotted this Demonettes of Slanesh, that was what like, oh yeah. I didn't know at that point that the models came in little pieces that you have to assemble. He left that out, but I think that I was so invested in how they look like that I was like, okay, I got into it. There was one of the models that I even painted by myself with no guidance the one time because I started really getting into it. And like I mentioned before, I really like to kill other players. I like to win. And so that's when the strategy came in for me. It was like, oh, if I plan this properly, I actually have chances of controlling the outcomes. And it made it fun for me. But I will say that that would not be my recommendation to get started with someone that is just getting started with game.
Some examples would be in the corporate world over 10 years now, at various companies that I've worked at. I've always looked to introduce board games prior to primarily working remote. When I was at the offices, typically it'd be during the lunchtime hours, starting sort of a board game club, getting team members to participate. Not that we're forcing them, but just piquing that interest for them to participate. Has always been a very, very strong tool to build that camaraderie and strengthen the teams that you establish when playing games, and then you build upon when you're doing the work. And it's always been a very successful tool, and just being able to see that progression from a new team to a performing team just move a little faster when you start introducing games on a regular basis. It's just creating that common experience, helps to build that safety, that feeling of safety amongst the team, your own tribe essentially. And having fun and having that experience definitely strengthens it, that you can build upon through other ways afterwards.
Mhm. Another example is one of our friends, his wife doesn't like board games. And we have tried introducing different ones and she just doesn't really like them. She loves Scrabble though. So then there was the one time we have this game called Two Little Birdie. What's it called?
A little wordy.
A Little Wordy. Okay. It was not even close. But A Little Wordy. So you still have tiles of of letters, and you have to make up a word, and it's a secret word. So it's, you have to start guessing it, and there's some like clues that you have to pay for and whatnot. And I think that actually, that didn't turn her into a gamer or anything like that, but she really enjoyed that game. And so, if there's any particular interest that you know about other people that can also help you find the game to recommend, whether they are into gaming or not. And like I said, maybe they won't continue being in your gaming group, but I think, on the one-offs, then you get together with them, you could potentially play a particular game.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this concludes the episode for today. We hope that you get some tips out of all the rambling that we did today. And very likely you have had different experiences than us. So we would like to hear about your success or unsuccessful stories recommending games to other people. Drop that in the comments so that we know about it. And we still haven't worked on that catchphrase.
No.
So what are you going to send us off with today?
Well, first off, please, if you do like this, feel free to subscribe. And aside from that, for now, keep rolling those dice, having fun, creating those shared experiences, and continuing to grow your community. That's it for us from today.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.